What's up guys, Loom here. Welcome back to the channel and thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be discussing everything Underpin, my comprehensive hard mode guide for the toughest solo challenge WoW has ever seen. This is the Season 2 Delve Challenge boss. You can take on in a group, but there are specific rewards for completing it solo. Those being the Golden Gobtrotter skin for our Season 2 Delve mount, and the feat of strength, let me solo him, the Underpin. The feat of strength is expected to go away when Season 3 drops, but it's still not for a while. We still have 11.1.5 ahead of us. You may be familiar with the Season 1 challenge boss, Zekvir. I will say the Underpin is much more difficult than the Zekvir fight, but also has several improvements that show that developers were listening to the problems we had with the Zekvir fight. The three most notable improvements are the inability for the boss to critically melee strike you, the lack of high walls and ceiling with stuff hanging off of it. Additionally, there's no dispel mechanic on this fight like we saw with the spittle on Zekvir, which could greatly influence which specs had an easier time or not. And you might be asking yourself, why this guy, why this video? I've currently completed the fight on 13 specs, 2 tank specs, 2 healer specs, and 9 DPS specs. And this is all within the item level range of 639 to 645. Also, I've managed to be hovering over Kaz's shoulder as she's completed the fight on 3 different specs herself. Consensually, of course. There are no locked doors. She's free to leave at any time. You'll find a playlist linked in the description below of all the completed hard mode fights that we have up on the channel. The plan is to complete the fight at a low item level for each role on each class. Maybe we extend that to every spec in the game. Stay tuned to find out. Those videos also contain an import string to the talents I used on those specs, in the description of course, as well as the information on what Brann's curios and levels were. You might also be asking yourself, where is this guy? How do I access him? In 11.1, we gained access to the new zone Undermine, and then the north end of that zone contains the Demolition Dome. There's no actual dome there, but that's the area that contains the world boss, the Gobfather, as well as a Demolition Dome delve, which requires completion of a level 7 delve to unlock the normal mode, and completion of a level 10 delve to unlock the hard mode version of the fight. Definitely recommend checking out the normal version of the fight. It has about half the health of the hard mode version, summons fewer adds, and does way less melee damage. And you even get a couple rune crests for your effort. And this video does have timestamps. If you're just looking for specific information on a part of the fight, the whole strategy, curio recommendation, anything, you can find that in the timeline of the video or in the chapters section in the description below. And before we get properly started, please subscribe to the channel if you're not yet subscribed. It helps us out a lot, helps promote the videos, and we'll keep you in the loop when we come out with new solo challenge content, such as the upcoming Horrific Visions, the Season 3 Delve Boss Challenge, spec guides for the Underpin, and Mage Tower content. Don't forget to give this video a like to help further promote it across YouTube, and tell me in the comments what you learned, liked, or hated about this video. Thanks so much guys, let's get going. There are some differences in this fight depending on what role you select when going in, and differences in melee damage received based on the armor type that your class has. For DPS players walking into this fight, the boss is going to have 371 million health, the absorb shields put up by the boss are 37 million damage to break, and the Cronies summoned by the boss take 3 bombs each to clear. Healers have reduced boss health to deal with, 278 million, and require 27 to 28 million damage to break each shield. Pretty sure the shields are 10% of its max health, and just like DPS, take 3 bombs to clear the adds. And as I said, there is varied melee damage based on the armor type you're playing as. I wouldn't really let the incoming melee damage be the determining factor on what you decide to play, but it's worth noting. Now on to tanks. You may have already heard this, it's a pretty popular topic of discussion. Tanks only have to kick 2 bombs to clear the Cronies. This does make that aspect of the fight a lot easier. What you may not have heard is the tanks also have to deal with the full amount of boss health, 371 million health, and the full absorb shields that DPS have to break through, 37 million damage. Certainly this gets easier with item level, but if you're going to play a tank, I would definitely opt for as much offensive output as you can. There's also a melee damage modifier for tanks. The plate tanks will take anywhere between 3 to 3.5 million damage per melee swing, and leather tanks will take the top end of 3.5 to 3.7 million damage. That's all before mitigation, but it does put an emphasis on mitigating and healing back the damage you take as a tank. And of course, healer Brann also makes that a little bit more comfortable of a fight. That said, you're going to need to be rather proficient on the tanks to break those absorb shields. Even if you have a Brann set as DPS, he's not going to take those shields out for you. You'll have to do the vast majority of damage to those absorb shields. I will clarify that tanks sometimes do need a 3rd bomb to take out the adds. I'm unsure exactly what triggers this, whether it's proximity to the add, how quickly you're kicking 2 bombs in succession, or whether or not you're hitting 1, 2, 3, or 5 adds with the explosion from that kick. In general though, tanks do have an easier time with adds as it will require fewer bombs overall, even in scenarios where you will routinely have to kick a third bomb. Brann can tank the Underpin certainly better than he can tank plus 11 delves, but it's still not very good. He does a pretty good job at following the player around, keeping aggro, dodging flamethrowers and crushes, though not always, but he can find himself cornered against a fence pretty easily, which makes it harder for him to dodge stuff, and he can certainly die. He doesn't do a large amount of damage. You're still going to be breaking through the shield primarily by yourself, though most of his accounted for damage, at least until the Mechasaurs come out, will be from the pulse that triggers when you heal him. Unfortunately, that's only effective healing. And though he takes a lot of damage, it's not always when you need the damage, and it's certainly not going to overlap with the shield coming up, considering the boss isn't actively meleeing him. He also seems to run away sometimes to try to aggro faraway mechs that you may have left up, which is at times a necessity, which can make boss position quite the hassle. I was a little surprised at how functional the fight was with Brann as a tank. I still think healers would be better off tanking the boss themselves and keeping Brann as damage. This will allow you more control over boss's position. You'll only have to do about a third of the healing to yourself that you do to Brann, and Brann will retain his execute mechanic and do a little bit more damage. I still aim to do some healer completions with Brann as a tank, but it feels like a square peg round hole situation to me. It is worth noting that if you run far enough away from Brann, he will snap to you, so moving him in very large distances is something you can control. Still, I wouldn't recommend him tanking for this reason. In the first week or two of this patch, you may have remembered that healer Brann had no defensive scaling and was dying immediately to just about anything in the game. That's since been fixed. DPS or healer Brann can still die on this fight, but it's very infrequent and you can still res him as normal like you would in a delve. And again, running great distances even from a knocked out Brann will snap him to you, allowing you time to res him as needed. It might take a couple tries depending on what the boss is about to do, but you'll have time to get that res out. Healer Brann still tosses out those awesome potions on the floor, so even if you're at full health, it's a good idea to grab those as best you can. Ideally, you'll grab 1 and then 2 and then 3, kind of spacing out the hot but then refreshing it. But sometimes if they're a little out of the way, you're just going to go get them and come back to the boss. That hot will keep you alive through melee attacks for the most part. And again, those potions come out every 30 seconds. They are thrown on the player, so if they are out in La La Land, it's because you were out in La La Land and then moved. Good idea to keep an eye on when they are tossed out. Even if you're not going to be staying put, pick them up and get on with the fight. Brann will still heal you on top of those potions using the Matrix and the normal hot that he puts out on you, as well as the Ironforge Aegis, which is a damage reduction. The crowd control immunity doesn't have any purpose on this fight. And good to keep in mind that DPS Brann will occasionally execute the cronies that are at low life, potentially saving you from having to backtrack into the fiery wreckage of defeated cronies just to eliminate a single ad, which I still wouldn't recommend you do even without that Brann execute. So on top of Brann's role, as you know, we have combat and utility curios you can outfit him with. Rank 4 curios are not required by any means, but you will see a noticeable difference in performance with each new rank. So the Mechasaur Easy Build Kit spawns an egg on the ground. It says the egg taunts. It's not going to taunt the boss, it never does. They do an incredible amount of damage. So much more damage than any other combat curio. You should be taking these pretty much all the time. And as you don't really have to do anything to direct them or deal with them, it's just free damage. I would think of it as an overall health nerf to the boss. You're not going to be doing much, but they'll just be chomping away at stuff. Even if they're on cronies, those cronies gotta go, right? The only other curio I mentioned in this tier would be the Pinged Augment Chip. So this increases Brann's health and his damage and healing. There's also a downside to this. It will occasionally spawn a robot that will fixate Brann, and if it collides with Brann, will stun him for 5 seconds and do a chunk of his health and damage. This is likely not enough to kill Brann consistently. It might do it once or twice. What's notable is the mob can be CC'd or damaged down, and when killed will even add a stack of the biofuel, which is another recommended curio we'll talk about in a second. Additionally, the fixate debuff that presents itself on Brann is a magic debuff, meaning any healer dispel or singe magic from a warlock pet or sacrificed pet, or mass dispel from a priest will actually remove this debuff. So for utility curios, we have the 3-dimensional bioprinter. This thing is basically another set of Mechasaurs. At rank 4 you get 2 bioprinted ads that'll be with you for the remainder of the fight, though you will need to tag a sub 40% health mob to get it to copy off of a crony. This doesn't take much. So an interesting yet discouraging aspect about the 3D bioprinted ads is that their damage seems to be based around your class or spec having some form of attack power scaling. On Mage, Priest, and Warlock specs, these seem to do no damage. Now Monk and Resto Druid are spell power classes, and while they used to function with passives that would convert spell power to attack power, using an add-on called Sin Stats, I can inspect the attack power of both specs, and it's about 17,500. Even Elemental and Resto Shaman appear to have 17,500 attack power. Using the same add-on confirms that Priest, Warlock, and Mage specs, of course, have 0 attack power. So essentially what I'm saying is if you're a Clothy, you're not going to use the bioprinted ads. There is another option, one that actually might be a little bit more beneficial anyway. And for the Shaman caster specs, while they do seem to do more damage than for the Clothies, it still seems considerably less than tanks, melees, and hunters, or even Resto Druid and Mistweaver Monk. As I'm coming out with the spec guides, I'll be sure to include whether I'm using bioprints, biofuel, loot radar, or anything else. Now the biofuel rocket gear gives you 2% haste and movement speed per stack, up to 30 stacks for every ad that you defeat in the fight, and you will get plenty of ads across this fight. There is a condition to this. To get the buff from a defeated Crony, you first need to tag it with a class ability. This can be at any health value, but if you simply kick 3 bombs into the set of 5 Cronies, you will walk away with no buffs. Some classes have passive random damage that'll go out and hit it. I would still just recommend tagging it to some degree. Obviously this will be easier for some classes than others. It doesn't necessarily have to be a damage spell to tag, and there's a little bit of work you need to do to maintain this buff. At rank 4, which I highly recommend you use, it's a 45-second buff, meaning you can take out 4 ads and leave the 5th one at low health to refresh that buff 10, 20, 30 seconds later, so you can extend the duration of that into the next set of ads. The biofuel buff stacks up to 30 times, so that's 60% additional haste and movement speed. When it's stacked that high, you're going to do very well just moving around, and you'll certainly have plenty of damage to get through any shield. Even just 10 stacks is quite a bit of haste and movement speed. I highly recommend giving it a shot. And while ranged do have a somewhat easier time of tagging all of the ads than say melee do, it can be a little disruptive to the overall gameplay. It's important to note that you have 2 other options for refreshing the biofuel buff. The ad summoned by the pinged augment chip will refresh your stacks here, as well as any backfill barrels summoned by the synergistic brutalizer trinket. Barrels actually do quite a bit of damage themselves, and then refreshing your biofuel buff just makes it even better. If you're a caster and you're really not into using the biofuel rocket gear, which does require a good amount of interaction to get a good benefit from, you do have, in my opinion, one other option that is not as bad as it may seem, and that is the loot radar. Part of this item's benefit is detecting mislaid curiosities and delves. There are none in this fight, but the ping that goes out every 30 seconds does give you a 10% damage bonus to anything that's under 95% health. The boss is mostly going to be under 95% health, as well as the ads after the first bomb they receive, meaning you might have a slightly easier time finishing them off with class abilities, or even just a second bomb. The buff is 15 seconds and goes out every 30 seconds. So 50% uptime on a 10% damage buff. Considering the ping goes out from Brann every 30 seconds and requires no additional effort on your end, it's not a bad option compared to putting a bunch of additional responsibility on yourself to tag mobs in time when you're kicking bombs into them. That can be a bit much for the first time you defeat the Underpin. And very quickly on the Kaja Cola carrier, you do spawn into the delve with all 4 buffs, and Brann will drop the 6-pack, giving you 2 more drinks. Worth noting that you have to leave the delve and re-enter every time to get the new 6-pack, basically on every wipe. And while you can manipulate gear sets to give yourself specific highest and lowest stats to try to min-max the Kaja Cola buff, you are dealing with 4% per stack of your actual stats. So you're not going to get 4% haste, you're going to get 4% of your haste. This was actually pointed out to me by Flair, our guild warrior. Smart guy. Thanks for pointing that out to me. I was using the cola buff for quite a while. There are rare colas that you can get from the 6-pack that can give you 4% main stat or 4% to all stats that make it a little bit more worth it. But even then, I would probably go with the loot radar, unless you do have one stat that you have 17 or 18,000 of, and 4, 8, or 12% of that is actually going to be 1,000, 1,500, or nearly 2k stats, right? Everything else is worth ignoring, at least in the context of this fight. All right, on to the boss itself. Good on you for sticking it out this far, or hello from somebody who just clicked on the boss section of the video. Very quickly on all the dangerous parts. The melee damage. Reminder, he cannot critically strike you. Unlike Zekfir, no more random 4 million damage hits. Generally, if you're picking up the Brann potions and having that hot rolling on you, you're going to be pretty safe. Definitely bring some potions, use them if you get low and you're about to take a melee. Everything else is pretty much a one-shot, or it's going to put you in a territory where the melee will then one-shot you. Crush. This is the circle on the ground where the boss jumps on you or Brann. This is a one-shot unless you're a tank. Don't get hit by it. This is actually a good way to get the boss from one end of the arena to another. Given that he'll target you or Brann on what is basically a coin flip, it's good to know that you can teleport or snap Brann to your location by running far enough away from him. As you get more familiar with the fight, you'll find yourself just moving a little bit earlier so that you don't have to deal with the boss jumping backwards to a Brann who's in a pile of dead cronies, right? Either way, crush one-shots, but it's also the primary way you're going to be moving the boss a very large distance. His flamethrower attack is a new claw smash. It can target you or Brann, probably minions as well. I'm not really sure about that. But when this goes out, if it's on you, you have three options. Move left or right, or away from it. You're very unlikely to survive it even with a cooldown unless Brann gets you a dispel right after you get hit by it. If you fought Zekvir, you know how fun it is to rely on Brann dispelling you. Getting hit by this is an end to your run, basically. If you're going to move left or right to dodge that flamethrower, you should also be moving towards the boss in left or right, as it's a frontal cone and it narrows as you get closer to the boss. It is very difficult to see exactly where the far edge of it is, but if you're already 30 or so yards away from the boss, just running directly away from it is also a very good option. But you can set yourself up pretty easily by either always being right next to the boss or 40 yards away from the boss. Anywhere in between, you'll set yourself up for getting blasted. And then we have the munitions cluster. The first time these go out is actually just before the first set of bombs, so it appears like these happen at the same time. They don't. They're two different abilities. When he raises his cannon arm up into the air and fires off like the Hunter fireworks style ability, that's when he's summoning the munitions. If you're in melee and you're not getting any additional random pattern on you, you can dodge left, and then right, and then left. Chances are you will get some of the RNG stuff on top of you as well, so circling the boss as you do it is another good option, or just stepping away. This is an ability where ranged have a distinct advantage. Getting this ability while you're trying to damage a shield down is an overlap that's going to happen regardless of when you push boss, as he does do it more often than on a 1-minute timer. This is just life. You gotta do the best you can. You can even see the bombs drop from up top, the ones that will hit you. I wouldn't really mess around with this too much. It's an absolute one-shot. Even on tanks, it's just gonna take you out. And then you have bomb drops. This is another area where I see a lot of complaints about RNG, but keep in mind the bombs are roughly going to spawn on you. If he starts shooting them in the air, you do have time to move out. The last few will definitely drop where your updated location is. In my opinion, you don't want to drop these near the fence line, as adding that layer of complexity of playing Frogger while trying to kick the balls to kill all the ads makes the situation that much harder. If you do find yourself on the fence line, you can stun and incapacitate mobs for a period of time just to disrupt their cast and give yourself a little extra breathing room there. I would generally recommend trying to drop these bombs on what would be the equivalent of the inside track of a track and field setup, so 15 to 20 yards away from where the cronies spawn on the fence line. And as you're kicking them into the cronies, try to start with the furthest ones out so that you're working your way more towards the cronies. Also worth keeping in mind, if bombs are starting to time out and you know or feel like they're not going to be used on that next set of ads, just clear them out of your immediate area, especially if the boss is nearing max energy where he's going to put a shield up. You will have, for the most part, 2 sets of bombs for every set of ads. Let's talk about the cronies themselves. So the damage they deal to you. They have an auto attack style shot. It's called Shoot. It does 300 to 350k fire damage to you per ad. If these all go out in a short enough window as the boss is meleeing you, it can feel like you're getting meleeed extra hard. Certainly with the ad spawns, getting a little bit of distance from the boss is preferred until you get rid of a couple of them. The Molten Ball does have a telegraphed red line that stays even after you take out the ad, so it can be a little disconcerting. This thing might not kill you, but it will knock you potentially into other damage or into the boss so he finishes you off with a melee attack. Do your best to avoid these. Certainly being 30 or 40 yards out and having them all meet you at one X point and then just being able to dodge that and see them all go by you, that's pretty handy. But when you're on the fence line or dodging munitions, this can be very dangerous. I would probably put Molten Balls as the #1 thing that kills people in this fight. I might be wrong, that's my experience doing the fight myself and watching people do it. The corpses of cronies you've defeated won't last forever, but they will last for 2 or 3 more sets of ads. And standing on or even running over these corpses will do 900k per tick. If other cronies are up or bosses on top of you meleeing you, this will be enough damage to end your run pretty quickly. Don't spend too much time around them. Sometimes you do have to get near the fence line to deal with some bombs. Do your best not to do that, and do your best not to run directly over them. Cronies are largely considered RNG and the biggest RNG issue that the fight offers. There's a couple facets to this. If you pull boss and the first set of cronies spawn in separate packs, 2 over here, 3 over here, this is kind of a bugged pull where the boss considers that the empty spots in front of him that are closest to him, where the ad should spawn, as occupied by corpses or live ads. So he spawns them off to the sides in the same behavior that he would if ads were currently occupying that spot. Whenever that happens, I recommend leaving instance and coming back in. This happens far, far less than it did the first couple of weeks, but if you're pulling the boss very quickly, or if you have a wipe and you get back in there and you just pull him as soon as he spawns, it's subject to this happening. I would not get emotionally attached to having to wipe in this manner, just wipe and get it over with. That said, how do they spawn? They spawn along the fence line in the closest available spots that cronies can spawn. Now, if you go around the perimeter of the room, there's enough for about 40 or 50 cronies. And if you're not to take out any cronies, they would just keep adding to the sides or the next closest area. So if you have the boss in the very middle, you could have 3 spawn at the entrance and 2 spawn in the back. This is why you want to have him kind of on that inside track, close to a piece of fence. And when you're done with a set of ads, you want to get far enough away to where he can spawn his next set of ads. So if you have him standing next to a burning corpse of an ad that's the last in the line, he's going to spawn 2 or 3 in front of him, and then 2 or 3 at the far end of the other line, or maybe even on the opposite short end of that field. So moving him a good bit is very important, and when you have him on the sides of the arena, he's going to spawn them potentially across the short width of the arena, 2 over here, 3 over here, instead of 5 right in front of him. Try to keep him consistently close to the fence, even along the curve line. This isn't going to be perfect. Having a split spawn does not mean you are dead in the water. You can certainly get past that, but as best you can, you want to manage his position so that they spawn 5 at a time, kind of right next to each other. This is for a couple reasons. One, it won't scuff you moving him to the next location after this set of ads. And 2, if you have 5 ads all standing next to each other, if you kick 3 bombs into that middle ad, all 5 ads will take damage from those bombs, as bombs do damage to an ad and then 2 spaces left or right of that ad. Sometimes you can get an ad to spawn in like a 3rd spot over. That can kind of mess things up a little bit. But even then, I would just move boss down and either take him out with the bombs that are left over, or wait for that next set of ads to take them all out at the same time. But leaving one ad up is sometimes what you have to do. When Kaz was progressing the fight, I kept telling her, no white whales, right? Don't lose the fight trying to get one ad down. If that ad is up and he's at the opposite end of the field, and that's just how it has to be, then that's how it has to be. You could probably come back and deal with him during another set of ads. But keeping the boss there for a 2nd or even 3rd set of bombs will put him out of position for his next set of cronies. As if he's standing next to corpses or live cronies, then you're going to get those split spawns that we talked about. So sometimes you leave them, don't be Captain Ahab, don't sink your ship for one white whale. Also, depending on the circumstance, you might even just burst down that ad. I wouldn't stick around too long to do it, and I wouldn't dedicate resources that you want on that next shield, but hammering that ad super duper quickly instead of standing around looking at it might be an option. You might get him low enough for Brann to use his execute, or at least in a position where you can kick 1 or 2 bombs into the ad instead of needing all 3, which would then allow you to proceed with the fight as normal, moving the boss away, getting that next set of 5 ads all next to each other. Let's talk about kicking bombs. The number 1 tip I have for bombs is do not click your bombs with your mouse. Set yourself up with a keybind for interact with target. This is found in the normal game keybinding options. I use R, I rebound my reply key to Shift R. This also cuts down on me spamming people with my rotation during conversations, but keybinding that is going to be a heck of a lot better than trying to click. Sometimes you can be trying to click through a mob or a boss's hitbox, and that can make it impossible or just very difficult. But using an interact keybind allows you to basically kick anything that's within a frontal cone of you. It's almost like a shockwave amount of space. But an interact keybind is way more convenient and is extremely generous. Instead of having to click a specific spot, this is just like clicking our keybinds. If you can have an ability bound, it's going to be way better. You're going to be having enough trouble just aiming the bombs in a quick fashion that having to follow up with a click that might not register the first time because you're not close enough, or that might turn your camera or might get caught on the boss's hitbox. This is all very bad stuff. So bind interact with target. Bind it to something and get rid of something else. This is also incredibly helpful when it comes to just interacting with stuff in the world. The eggs you loot during Noble Garden are a great example of how much easier it is to use an interact with target keybind, as it affords you this wide, generous space of the game considering, hey, he's interacting with target. What's that closest target to him? Let's do it. Also interacting with friendly NPCs, picking up quests, all sorts of stuff. Just a little bit easier than having to click stuff around the screen. Keeping your mouse open to adjust your camera or select a new specific target. is a much more efficient way of playing, so do it. You're just going to be setting yourself up for a very bad time if you're clicking your bombs. I know a lot of people are adverse to key binding new things or kind of anything. I would really recommend doing this one. I have a key binding video that came out a couple weeks ago. I have that linked right up here or even the description below. Improve your gameplay, reduce frustration, extend your life by reducing stress on yourself. And on the topic of kicking bombs, there's more rhetoric about bombs stopping short of your target, of randomly not going where you need them to go. I don't really find this to be the case, and let me explain to you why. If you notice, this room is covered in kind of light patches and dark patches of ground. These are actually topographical raised and lowered areas. The darker areas are lower than the lighter areas, and in fact the back middle of the room is a giant raised patch. If you're kicking from the center of the room to the adds in the back of the room on that fence line, you will see these bombs come up short kind of every time, almost without fail. I avoid that area as best I can. Sometimes there's not much you can do about it and you just have to deal with it, but you will be having to follow up on those bombs quite often, just because kicking a bomb uphill is going to have it hit that ground and stop shorter as a function of the in-game physics. This isn't random, this is you kicking a ball uphill. Conversely, if you're kicking to adds that are in the darker areas, from the raised area or even just from the darker area, you're going to notice that these go the full distance pretty much every time. The only other issue I see with bombs not going where you want them to, sometimes you're a little too close to them and you run past them and you click them and you just kick them behind yourself. Just take an extra fraction of a second to line yourself up. And what I kind of recommend for lining yourself up is kind of strafe backwards. If you can't line yourself up as you're running to a bomb, then get on the bomb and kind of strafe backwards to fine-tune your adjustment. You're not going to be moving as fast and you will keep the bomb in front of you, so as soon as you get the correct angle, kick it, you're good to go. Alright, let's talk about the absorb shield on the boss. The timing on this is not random. The boss simply casts his shield when he hits max energy, with one additional condition, and that is he needs to be at 81.5% health or lower for him to use any shields. Meaning if he heals up above that value, he won't cast that next shield until he's at max energy and again at 81.5% or lower. What this tends to work out to is that first shield doesn't come up for 90 seconds or 2 minutes. With more gear, this is going to be a little bit less. This is, in my opinion, a deterrent to lusting on the pole. While the shield might not be the toughest part of the fight, it is the most punishing outside of outright dying, and a lot of times you will die just trying to break the shield. So typically I would use 1 or 2 minute cooldowns on the pole, and then don't touch any cooldowns until that first shield goes out. And at that point, shields are going to be roughly 1 minute apart. It's actually a little bit quicker, it's about 55 seconds apart. So your 1 minute cooldowns will eventually get outpaced by that shield. If you are a class with strictly 1 minute cooldowns, you do want to send those as quickly as you possibly can. Sometimes if it's a single direct big hit, you just kind of have to hit it as soon as you start channeling. And when you get to the shield that starts coming up and you have 5-6 seconds left on your cooldown, this is when you might want to use Lust or a potion or something to catch you back up to that shield. An unused trinket maybe. Delves are dropping a lot of unused trinkets. There's 1 minute, 90 second, and 2 minute varieties of trinkets. Sometimes you might be alternating 2 90-second trinkets or a 90-second and a 2 minute trinket. The foot bomb trinket's the only 1 minute cooldown. That's typically going to be up for every shield, and since it does its damage pretty quick, it'll take a while for that 55-second shield CD to outpace your foot bombs, considering you have about 20 seconds to deal with a shield. That makes sense. But DPS and tanks have to deal 37 million damage within this cast to deplete the shield and prevent the boss from healing. During the shield, you get 150% damage increase. He will heal for 25% of his health if it goes out. This is subject to heal reductions. So Mortal Strike, Wound Poison, Rising Sun Kick, stuff like that will reduce the amount of healing he receives. I will tell you the difference between Wound Poison and Instant Poison isn't going to be why you didn't break a shield. So if you're a rogue, you might want to opt for the Wound Poison. There's even a class talent that allows you to stack that up 2 more times for a 45% reduction. So unused trinkets that you can use in this window are going to be 150% better. So having trinkets that are otherwise very good or sim very well can actually be worse than unused trinkets that you can use exactly in this window, especially for alternating 2 trinkets of a 1 minute to 90-second cooldown, meaning you're going to have a trinket for every shield. A trinket like House of Cards is very nice, but if you have a Florendo's that's going to deal 5 million damage on the unused during the shield, that might be the way to go. Healers have a slightly smaller shield to deal with, 27 million. Healers also have reduced output for unused trinkets just like tanks do. That said, unused trinkets are still quite good options, Even if you have Brann set to DPS, he is not going to pop the shield for you or even do most of or a lot of the damage necessary to pop that shield. He will do some, but not a whole lot. You can't rely on him to do it for you, so don't. You'll have to be prepared. So you're going to use a cooldown or alternate cooldowns. There's another situation where you need to have damage for a very specific moment, otherwise you're not going to be able to complete the fight. Unless you're a class that can just always do that type of damage whenever you need to. Marks Hunter is a good example of that. Shadow Priest is a good example of that. I wouldn't even say any melee falls into that category, as it often overlaps with munitions, the dodgy swirls, which makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with that shield, especially if you're a class that has to be glued to the boss to do its damage. And all of the extended melee range talents have been taken out of the game, so while you might have abilities that are castable outside of direct melee range, you're definitely going to be missing out on autos or at least part of your rotation as you dodge all those munitions. So putting this all together, what does the fight look like? We have the playlist. You can watch me do it on all the classes that I've posted. Those will keep coming. I'll have spec guides as well, but in general, the fight's going to go you pull boss, get him somewhat close to the first fence, dodge the first jump, dodge the flamethrowers, dodge the munitions as those first set of bombs comes in. Try not to be near the fence when those bombs are blasted so you can kick them at a relatively safe distance. Have those ads spawn, tag them if you need to for your curios. Try to hit the center mob with 3 bombs to get rid of all of the ads at once. Sometimes they're staggered a little bit far apart, so you're not going to be able to do that. But if you have biofuel, you're going to want to keep one alive anyway, so you can refresh it a little bit later into that buff duration. Boss will be at max energy about a minute into the fight, and then once he hits that 81.5%, that first shield comes up. But a good time to push that 81.5% is right after you deal with that second set of ads. Some classes can do it pretty closely after that first set, but lusting on that first shield, sending everything, and then making sure you have cooldowns up for every 1 minute after that, that's the way to go. Once you have those 5 ads dealt with, you're going to move the boss generously far away from them so that that next set of 5 ads can be spawned even if the boss happens to jump on Brann away from you, or even if he stays on your location. And I previously mentioned that the boss's crush ability, the jump on you or Brann ability, is a great way to get him moved from one location to another. If you're thinking, oh, he always jumps on Brann and Brann is at the opposite end of where I want him to be, if you just run as far away from Brann as you can, he will eventually snap to you, and then the boss will jump on you or Brann, who are both in a relatively similar area, allowing you to get to that next set of ads in a new, fresh spawn location. But a good pattern to use is that first set of ads in the very front, then you move over to the fence where it first starts the curve, drop 5 ads there, then to the other side of that curve for the next 5, and then you can kind of go back towards the middle in front of the room, again, not dealing with that back patch of raised ground, and the corpses from the first set of ads will already be despawned at this point, allowing you to then repeat that pattern. I'll try to have a graphic here to visually illustrate what I'm talking about. But unless I'm mistaken, that is everything Underpin. Again, stay tuned for spec guides. Let me know in the comments which one you want to see first. Go ahead and check out the playlist for my current kills. As soon as this video comes out, I'll be working on the spec guide to the stuff I've already completed. Like the video if you liked it. Let me know what you gained from watching this video. Best of luck out there on your own Underpin attempts. It's an incredibly difficult fight, in my opinion, harder than any Mage Tower challenge, even early Legion. I expect to hear it in the comments about that statement. But while tough, I think it's quite fair. The fight is truly in your hands. Not everything's going to work out perfectly every time, but your own gameplay and your strategy is going to be the biggest hurdle to completing this fight. It doesn't matter why, whatever just happened. If you're not dead, deal with the situation. Keybind your interactive target, have a strategy, have your cooldowns ready, maybe hold lust for that one shield where you're not going to have things up perfectly. Keep a level head and just keep at it. You'll get it. Happy to work with anybody. If they're questioning what kind of cooldowns they should use or trinkets or anything in the comments, just let me know. I want to thank you so much for your time today. I know this was a long one. I hope you got what you needed out of it. Sub to the channel if you got anything of value out of this one. Have a great rest of your day or evening. Peace.